Putting God first in our lives is the foundation upon which everything else should be built. It is a principle that transforms, shapes, and refines the way we live, love, work, and pursue our purpose. When we make the decision to prioritize God above all else, something powerful happens. We start aligning our lives with a divine plan that far exceeds anything we could imagine for ourselves. This journey is not just about following rules or going through motions. It is about surrendering to a higher calling that shifts our perspectives and sets us on a path that leads to fulfillment and peace. We live in a world that is constantly vying for our attention, pulling us in every direction, asking us to put our faith in everything except the one true source of all power. It's easy to get lost in the noise. It's easy to be consumed by the distractions of life and forget the fundamental truth that without God at the center of our lives, everything else will eventually crumble. To put God first is not simply a religious slogan. It is a life-altering commitment that requires us to adjust our priorities and reorder our lives. This doesn't mean that we won't face challenges or difficulties along the way. In fact, it is often in the moments of trial and struggle that we are most tempted to abandon our commitment to God's sovereignty. The world offers temporary solutions, fleeting comforts, and quick fixes, but these things don't last. The joy of having God first is that no matter what comes our way, we can stand firm, knowing that He is greater than any problem or obstacle we might encounter. When we make the decision to put God first, we acknowledge His sovereignty over all aspects of our lives. We say that we trust Him with our futures, our relationships, our careers, and our dreams. We recognize that His wisdom and understanding surpass our own, and therefore we submit ourselves to His guidance. Trusting God requires us to relinquish control over our own lives and surrender to a plan that may not always make sense in the moment, but ultimately leads to fulfillment and purpose. Putting God first means that we are not driven by the pursuit of personal gain or material wealth. We are not motivated by the fleeting approval of others or the quest for status. Our true satisfaction comes from knowing that we are living in alignment with God's will, and that He is our provider, our sustainer, and our protector. We must choose every day to seek Him first, even when it feels like the world is pushing us to prioritize everything else. The first step in putting God first is recognizing that He is the source of all good things in our lives. Every gift, every opportunity, every breath we take comes from Him. We can't take credit for the blessings in our lives, nor can we control the outcome of our efforts without His divine intervention. The Bible reminds us that it is in Him that we live, move, and have our being. This acknowledgement shifts our perspective, reminding us that we are stewards, not owners. Everything we have is a gift, and our role is to honor God with what we've been given. One of the most powerful aspects of putting God first is the way it influences our relationships with others. When God is at the center of our lives, we begin to see others through His eyes. We learn to love more deeply, forgive more freely, and extend grace in ways that we never thought possible. Our relationships become healthier and more meaningful because we are no longer trying to meet our own needs through others, but rather we are seeking to serve and uplift those around us. Putting God first also requires a shift in our mindset about success and achievement. The world measures success by outward appearance, wealth, status, influence, and power. But God's definition of success is different. True success in God's eyes is found in faithfulness, obedience, and humility. It is not about being the most famous, the richest, or the most accomplished. It's about honoring Him with our talents and gifts and using them for His glory. When we put God first, we are able to focus on what really matters: loving God, loving others, and fulfilling the purpose He has for us. In the book of Matthew, Jesus tells us, "Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." This is a promise we can stand on. When we prioritize God's kingdom and His will, we can trust that everything else will fall into place. This does not mean that life will be without struggles. It's important to recognize that putting God first is not a one-time decision, it is a daily choice. Each day, we are faced with countless distractions and temptations that seek to pull us away from our commitment to God. The world tells us to prioritize ourselves, our careers, our finances, and our ambitions. But God calls us to prioritize Him. This requires intentionality. It requires setting aside time to pray, to read his word and to seek his guidance in every area of our lives. It means turning off the noise and tuning into the voice of God, allowing him to shape our hearts and our minds. Putting God first also means living with an eternal perspective. It's easy to become consumed with the things of this world, the struggles, the pressures, the challenges. But when we keep our eyes fixed on God and his eternal promises, we are reminded that this life is temporary. Our true home is in heaven, and everything we experience here is shaping us for eternity. This perspective shifts the way we view our problems, our success, and our relationships. It helps us focus on what really matters and live with purpose and meaning. When we put God first, we also become vessels for his blessing to flow through. God's love, grace, and generosity are meant to be shared with others. As we experience his goodness in our own lives, we are called to extend that goodness to those around us. This is the heart of living a life that reflects God's love. When we make him the priority, we begin to see opportunities to serve others, to give, to love, and to make a difference in the lives of those around us. It's also crucial to understand that putting God first does not mean that everything will be easy or that life will go according to our plan. There will be moments when we face challenges, when we question why things are happening the way they are, or when we feel like giving up. But it is in those moments that we are called to trust God even more. Our faith is not built in the easy times, it is strengthened in the trials. When we put God first, we trust that he is working all things together for our good, even when we can't see it. There is a peace that comes from putting God first that surpasses understanding. It is the peace of knowing that we are in his will, that we are walking the path he has set before us, and that we are not alone. The world may throw obstacles in our way, but when we put God first, we have the assurance that he is with us every step of the way, and that peace is something that no circumstance can take away. As we walk this journey of putting God first, we must also remember the importance of consistency. It's not enough to prioritize God for a moment or a season. It must become a lifestyle. This means daily choosing to submit to his will, to seek his presence, and to follow his guidance. It's about building habits that honor God, such as prayer, worship, and fellowship with other believers. When we make these practices a part of our everyday lives, we find that we are constantly being transformed into the image of Christ. Putting God first is a decision that affects every area of our lives. It impacts how we spend our time, how we spend our money, how we treat others, and how we view the world around us. It's a decision to let go of our own desires and to take up the life that God has planned for us. It is a life of surrender, but it is also a life of purpose, peace, and fulfillment. When we make God our priority, everything else falls into place. Our relationships improve, our purpose becomes clear, and our joy is full. There is no greater fulfillment than knowing that we are living for something greater than ourselves. Putting God first isn't just about what we gain, it's about what we give. It's about living for God's glory and making a difference in the lives of others. When we make that choice, we are truly living life to the fullest. To put God first is to embrace a life of purpose, of love, and of service. It is to recognize that he is the source of all good things and to trust him with everything we have. It is a commitment that transforms us from the inside out, making us more like him and equipping us to make a difference in the world around us. Putting God first is the key to living a life that is rich in meaning, fulfillment, and joy. And when we make this decision, we discover that the life we've always dreamed of is found not in our own plans, but in God's perfect will for us. Putting God first is not just a one-time decision, but a daily commitment to align our lives with his will. It means surrendering control, trusting his guidance, and placing him above all other priorities. Putting God first requires recognizing that his plan is greater than our own understanding. By seeking his guidance and living with an eternal perspective, we find peace and purpose, even in life's challenges. When God is at the center, our relationships and sense of purpose are transformed. Prioritizing him empowers us to love others selflessly, live with meaning, and be a source of positive change in the world. Prioritizing God above all else is the foundational principle that shapes every aspect of a believer's life. It's more than just a phrase, it's a life-altering decision that has the power to transform how we approach everything, from our daily routines to the way we handle challenges, relationships, and aspirations. In a world where distractions are endless and society constantly tells us to place our focus on success, wealth, status, and personal desires, putting God first requires a conscious, intentional choice that is not always easy, but is always necessary. At the core of prioritizing God above all else is a recognition of his sovereignty and supremacy. God is the creator of the universe, and he holds the power over every aspect of life. Acknowledging his position as the ultimate authority in our lives is essential in understanding that everything we have, everything we are, and everything we hope to become comes from him. This understanding doesn't just affect our belief systems, it alters our behavior, our decisions, and our values. When we make God the priority, we are telling ourselves and the world that we trust him more than anything else. We trust that his plans are far better than our own, that his timing is perfect, and that his will is the best guide for our lives. This commitment to prioritize God does not mean that we abandon our responsibilities or passions. It doesn't mean that we should neglect our work, families, or personal growth. In fact, when God is first, it brings clarity and purpose to everything else. It means that we approach our work, relationships, and dreams with the intention of honoring him. By keeping God at the forefront, we align our goals with his will, and that alignment leads to a deeper sense of peace and fulfillment. It shifts our mindset from trying to achieve things for our own gain to seeking to glorify God in everything we do. Putting God first also means that we choose to seek him daily. In our fast-paced world, it's easy to be overwhelmed by distractions, whether it's work, social media, or our own ambition. But when we make God a priority, we intentionally create space to connect with him through prayer, reading his word, and worship. These moments of connection are not just rituals or religious acts. They are vital to cultivating a relationship with God. It's through daily time spent with him that we grow in understanding, wisdom, and strength. When we prioritize God, we seek to understand his desires for our lives and learn how to live in accordance with his purposes. This focus on God also helps us navigate the complexities of life with confidence and clarity. Life often throws challenges our way, and we may find ourselves at crossroads, facing uncertainty or tough decisions. It's in these moments that prioritizing God becomes even more crucial. By making him the first thing we turn to in times of struggle, we receive guidance and peace. The Bible tells us that if we seek God's wisdom, he will give it generously. When we prioritize God, we choose to trust that he is always with us, providing the answers, direction, and strength we need to navigate life's challenges. When we prioritize God above all else, we also learn to trust him with the outcomes of our lives. One of the biggest challenges we face in life is the desire for control. We want to know the future, to manage our paths, and to ensure things go according to our plans. But putting God first requires a shift in perspective. It means trusting that God's plan is better than anything we could orchestrate on our own. We are called to work diligently, make decisions with wisdom, and pursue our goals, but we must also surrender the outcomes to God, knowing that his timing and provision are perfect. Moreover, putting God first changes the way we view success. In the eyes of the world, success is often defined by material wealth, status, or recognition. But God's definition of success is different. When we prioritize God, success is no longer measured by what we gain, but by how faithfully we live in obedience to his will. True success is found in loving God, serving others, and fulfilling the purpose he has set for us. This mindset frees us from the pressures of comparison and competition, allowing us to focus on what truly matters. Prioritizing God also strengthens our character and shapes our hearts. As we continually seek God's presence and align our lives with his word, we are transformed into the image of Christ. This transformation is not about perfection, but about growing in love, humility, and grace. It enables us to love others more deeply, forgive more freely, and serve without expecting anything in return. When God is first in our lives, we begin to see people as he sees them and respond with compassion, kindness, and understanding. Putting God first is a decision that not only impacts our individual lives, but also ripples out into our families, communities, and the world. Our choices and actions serve as a witness to others of the goodness of God. When those around us see our commitment to putting God first, it can inspire them to do the same. Our faith becomes a light that draws others closer to him. Ultimately, prioritizing God is not just about seeking blessings or answers to our problems. It's about building a deep, lasting relationship with the creator of the universe. It is an invitation to trust him, to walk with him, and to experience the peace and joy that come from knowing we are living in his will. It is through making God the first priority that we discover the fullness of life he has promised. And as we continually choose to put God first, we realize that everything else in life falls into place in ways we could never have imagined. Trusting in God's plan is one of the most powerful and transformative decisions a person can make. It is not always easy, especially when life takes unexpected turns and we face challenges that seem overwhelming. However, the act of trusting God's plan requires a deep understanding that he is the ultimate architect of our lives and his wisdom far exceeds our own. It is a decision to surrender our own limited understanding and embrace a path that may not always make sense at the moment, but is always leading us towards something greater. Trusting in God's plan is not just a passive belief, it is an active, ongoing choice to rely on his promises, his timing, and his guidance. One of the foundational aspects of trusting God's plan is recognizing his sovereignty. God is not only the creator of the universe, but also the sustainer of it. He knows the beginning from the end and understands every detail of our lives, from our hopes and dreams to the struggles and setbacks we face. Nothing surprises him, and nothing happens outside of his will. When we trust in God's plan, we acknowledge that he is in control, even when circumstances feel chaotic or beyond our grasp. It's important to understand that while we may not always understand God's ways, he is faithful and his plan is always for our good. The Bible teaches us that God's ways are not our ways, and his thoughts are higher than ours. This can be difficult to comprehend when we are in the midst of hardship or when things aren't going as we expect. But the essence of trusting in God's plan is to let go of our own desires for control and trust that his plan is better than anything we could ever orchestrate on our own. God sees the bigger picture, and what may seem like a setback or a detour in our lives may actually be a necessary part of his greater plan for us. There are times when we face challenges, loss, or confusion, but those moments are often when our faith is tested and refined. When we trust God's plan, we choose to believe that he is working in the background, even when we can't see it or understand it. Trusting in God's plan also means accepting his timing. We live in a world that encourages instant gratification, where everything seems to be moving at a rapid pace. We want things to happen according to our schedule, and when they don't, we can become frustrated or anxious. However, God's timing is perfect, and he works things out in ways that we cannot always predict. Trusting in his plan means waiting on his timing, knowing that he is never late and that his delays are often preparing us for something even better. It means that while we may not always understand the waiting periods in our lives, we can rest assured that God is doing something in us and for us during those times. In those moments, our trust in God's plan grows as we learn to wait patiently and expectantly. It's also important to remember that trusting God's plan involves a willingness to surrender our own desires and expectations. Often we have our own idea of what our life should look like, and we make plans that we believe will bring us happiness or fulfillment. But God's plan may look very different, and it may require us to let go of our own expectations in order to embrace his will. This surrender is not about giving up on our dreams or desires, but about submitting them to God, trusting that he knows what is best for us. It requires humility to accept that his vision for our lives might be far better than what we have envisioned for ourselves. When we trust in God's plan, we also trust that he has a purpose for everything we go through. Every experience, whether joyful or painful, has a purpose in shaping us into the people we are meant to become. Even in the midst of hardship, we can trust that God is using those moments to grow us, refine our character, and prepare us for the future he has for us. The Apostle Paul writes in Romans 8:28 that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. This verse is a powerful reminder that even when things don't go the way we planned or when life takes unexpected twists, God is working everything together for our good. Trusting God's plan means believing in this promise, even when we can't immediately see how things will work out. Trusting in God's plan also requires a deep reliance on his guidance. There are many decisions we must make in life, and it can feel overwhelming trying to navigate through all the choices. Trusting God's plan means seeking His direction and listening for His voice as we make decisions. God promises to guide us when we seek Him with all our hearts, and He gives us the Holy Spirit to help us discern His will. When we trust in God's plan, we take the time to pray, read His Word, and listen for His guidance before making decisions. It's about submitting our choices to Him, knowing that He will lead us in the way that is best for us. Another key aspect of trusting God's plan is the peace that comes with it. Trusting in God doesn't mean that we won't face difficulties, but it does mean that we can experience peace even in the midst of those difficulties. When we trust in God's plan, we acknowledge that He is with us through every situation and that His peace will guard our hearts and minds. This peace comes from knowing that God is in control and that nothing in our lives happens by accident. It is the kind of peace that surpasses understanding, the kind of peace that calms our fears and assures us that everything is under God's care. Trusting in God's plan also strengthens our faith. When we look back on the times in our lives when we trusted God and saw His faithfulness, our faith is built up. Every time we trust God's plan and see it unfold, we are reminded of His goodness, His power, and His faithfulness. Our faith grows stronger as we experience God's provision and guidance, even in the most challenging of times. Each act of trust builds a foundation for the next, enabling us to rely on God even more in the future. Ultimately, trusting in God's plan is an act of faith, and faith is the key to experiencing God's best for our lives. When we trust Him, we align ourselves with His will, and we open ourselves up to the blessings, growth, and peace that come from following His plan. It requires patience, surrender, and sometimes even pain, but the reward is a life lived in alignment with God's purposes. A life filled with hope, peace, and an unshakable trust that He is working all things for our good. When we prioritize God and trust in His plan, it inevitably transforms both our relationships and our sense of purpose in profound ways. The natural byproduct of putting God first is a change in how we interact with others and how we view the world around us. It shifts our motivations, helps us align our lives with divine intentions, and opens the door to deeper connections with those around us. This transformation is not just about improving our relationships on a surface level, but about creating an authentic and enduring impact on how we live and love. At the heart of this transformation is the understanding that God's love is the foundation for all relationships. When we experience God's unconditional love, it becomes the model for how we are called to love others. Jesus Himself taught us that the greatest commandment is to love the Lord with all our heart, soul, and mind, and the second is to love our neighbors as ourselves. The more we draw near to God, the more His love fills us and overflows into our relationships. This kind of love is not based on what others can do for us or how they make us feel, but is rooted in the desire to serve and care for others as God has served and cared for us. The transformation in our relationships begins with our own hearts. When God is first, we begin to look at others through a different lens. We see them not just as individuals with their own strengths, flaws, and needs, but as people whom God loves deeply. This perspective changes how we approach others, from the way we engage with our families, friends, and colleagues, to how we interact with strangers. Our relationships are no longer based solely on personal preferences, social dynamics, or superficial connections. They become opportunities to reflect God's love and grace. We start to see the value in people beyond their outward appearances or actions and begin to engage with them on a deeper, more meaningful level. This transformation also affects our capacity for forgiveness and reconciliation. In our human nature, it's easy to hold grudges, harbor resentment, and refuse to forgive when we feel wronged. But when we prioritize God, we are reminded of His forgiveness towards us. The Bible teaches that we are to forgive others as God has forgiven us. This doesn't mean that forgiveness is always easy or that it erases the pain caused by others, but it frees us from the bondage of bitterness and resentment. Trusting in God's ability to heal wounds and restore broken relationships empowers us to take the first step toward reconciliation, even when it feels difficult. As we experience God's mercy, we learn to extend that same mercy to others, transforming conflicts and divisions into opportunities for growth, healing, and unity. Furthermore, prioritizing God changes our approach to service. and selflessness. When God's love fills our hearts, we are motivated not by self-interest, but by a desire to serve others. This shift from self-centeredness to a heart of service deepens the purpose behind our relationships. We no longer see relationships as transactional, where we only give if we get something in return. Instead, we understand that true fulfillment comes from loving and serving others without expecting anything in return. Our relationships, whether they be familial, friendships, or even in the workplace, become platforms to share God's love and grace with others. This kind of selflessness fosters mutual respect, strengthens bonds, and creates a sense of shared purpose. At the same time, putting God first gives our lives a deeper sense of purpose and direction. Many of us spend our lives searching for purpose, looking for meaning in our careers, achievements, or even our personal lives. However, when we center our lives on God, we discover that true purpose is found not in what we accomplish for ourselves, but in how we align our lives with His will. God's purpose for us is often not just about individual success or personal gain, but about contributing to something greater than ourselves. As we trust in God's plan and seek His guidance, we begin to realize that our purpose is intimately tied to serving others and fulfilling God's kingdom here on earth. Whether we are raising a family, building a career, or engaging in our communities, God's purpose provides meaning and direction that goes beyond our immediate circumstances. As we grow in our relationship with God, we begin to discern the unique gifts and talents He has given us. These gifts are not just for our benefit, but for the benefit of others. Our purpose becomes clearer as we recognize how God has uniquely equipped us to contribute to His work. This understanding transforms the way we approach every aspect of our lives. We begin to see that our work is not just a means of earning a living, but a calling to serve, to impact lives, and to build God's kingdom in whatever sphere we are placed. The pursuit of success, achievement, or recognition fades in comparison to the joy of knowing that we are fulfilling our God-given purpose, no matter how big or small that calling may seem. This sense of purpose extends beyond our immediate circles. As we put God first and focus on loving others, we become more attuned to the needs of the world around us. We become agents of change, looking for opportunities to serve and make a difference in our communities and beyond. Our relationships are no longer limited to our immediate family or friends, but expand to include those in need, the marginalized, and the broken. Our hearts break for what breaks God's heart, and we take steps to be a part of His healing work in the world. Ultimately, transforming relationships and purpose through putting God first is not just about external actions, but about an internal change in our hearts. It's about becoming more like Christ in how we love, serve, and engage with others. As we align ourselves with God's will, we begin to reflect His character in every area of our lives. This transformation is not instant, and it requires continual growth and surrender. But as we seek to prioritize God in every relationship and every aspect of our lives, we find that our purpose becomes clearer, our connections deeper, and our lives more meaningful. When we put God first, He transforms everything, and we experience the fullness of life that He has designed for us.